Welcome to the Roots and Routes podcast. This is bigger than sports, where community and socioeconomics is the root to our success. I always wish our hometown heroes had the technology during their time to document their journeys, so we'll do it for the rest of them. And we are here on location at the legendary 14th Street Community Center. On the Roots and Routes podcast today, we have a special guest who I'd like to call my friend, Mr. Dave Maynard, aka Trojan Dave. Let's give it up for Mr. Dave Maynard. Trojan Dave. Good to have you here, Dave.
Thank you, Gerald. I'm looking forward to this.
This will be a great trip down memory lane, and we're going to take the audience with us. So before we get started, I'd like to tell everybody, share, subscribe, follow us. We're on all the digital platforms. We're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, fan base, Twitter, aka X. We're on all the spots. In the meantime, if you don't know Dave Maynard, now you're going to know him, a little bit of him. So we're going to dive right into it. The first thing that I ask everybody that comes on the Roots and Routes podcast, the very first question I ask everybody is, if you had 12-year-old Dave Maynard right there in front of you right now, what advice would you give your 12-year-old self?
I would say the very first thing is something that actually happened in my life. I would tell that 12-year-old Dave Maynard, accept the Lord Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and move on from there. Now, when I was 16 years old, that's what happened to me. So I can relate to that question. I accepted the Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior at Calvary Baptist Church in Portsmouth. And then I followed in believer's baptism shortly after that. That's what I would tell a 12-year-old Dave Maynard. I think it's you get yourself settled spiritually.
Yeah.
That's more important than anything.
I love it. I love it. So stability is very key in a believer's life. And I think the more that we are able to reflect on our lives as believers, we can look back and say, man, I wish I'd have done it even sooner. So there's a lot of choices that we go through in life, and it's a lot easier to make certain choices if you got Christ as your backing. So I appreciate that answer.
Well, I think the sooner that you get grounded in God, that it definitely works out for the better. There's no question.
Love it. So let's go ahead and get started. We want to give the audience a little bit of background of who you are as a man, as a person, as a true blue Trojan fan. So I'm presenting to some and introducing to others Mr. Dave Maynard. So let's start with a little bit about your foundation, your upbringing. Can you share a bit about your early years growing up? You mentioned you accepted Christ at, what did you say, 16 years old?
Yeah.
So let's go back even before then. Let's go back to your earliest memory about life.
I grew up in the far east end of Portsmouth, which was at that time called the Terminal. My dad worked on the railroad. I grew up on Poplar Street. We had a house up on Poplar Street. We were there until about 1966. My dad was transferred up to Bellevue, Ohio, which is up near Lake Erie, for about a year. Then we moved back to Portsmouth after he got transferred again. And then he rented a house on Waller Hill between 20th and 21st Street. So that's basically my childhood. I didn't have much of a sports background at all. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any contact with black community whatsoever when I lived up in the Terminal because I'm just a little kid. I didn't see any black folks that lived in that area. But when I moved to Waller Hill, that was my first exposure to African American.
We'll get there. I will say this. When it comes to just genuine and really passionate people, Dave, you're one of the most genuine people that I've ever come across and very passionate. Just a little bit of context. This friend of mine, he's the type that if you get in a conversation with him, you may think it's going to go one way, and for whatever reason, he'll get what the young people call triggered. It's not much. I intentionally was trying to have a couple of what I like to call
I know what you were up to.
Maynard's kids here, but we wasn't able to get those in the context of just this conversation. This is a sports podcast. It's bigger than sports, but do you happen to know your first love when it comes to the athletic field?
The first time that I ever was exposed to sports was back at Lincoln School when we first moved to Waller Hill.
Okay.
I picked up a basketball one day and I went down to the court and shot. That was back in about 1968, so that was my first exposure to sports.
You're a teenager at that point.
1968, I was about 12 years old.
So almost
sixth grade at Lincoln School.
Got you. What school to go to? Elementary.
Garfield, which is now Vern Rife. I went there through about the third or fourth grade, and then we moved out of town.
Where did you move to as far as out of town?
Bellevue, Ohio.
How far is Bellevue?
Bellevue is about 15 miles south of Sandusky.
Oh, wow.
It's way up there in Ohio.
Was your first sports fandom as far as professional teams? It didn't have nothing to do with that, did it?
About 1968, I started watching the Cleveland Browns with my dad. Now, I do want to say, though, that when I was in Bellevue, I did play Little League baseball. But really, I really got into sports when I got back to Portsmouth.
Okay. And we'll talk more about that as well. But
I'm not very good either, by the way.
And listen, in terms of just pure determination, when it comes to long distance running, there's nobody that could have as much determination as my friend to the left of me, Mr. Dave Mentor. So what got you into long distance running, cross country? I don't know the exact terminology. And how young were you, and when did you realize you were good, or if you were
you could throw out the word good. Actually, my first love was basketball. One day, I don't know how running started. It just had an amorphous start. It was probably in the springtime, and I probably was a bored little kid.
Yeah.
So I just put on a pair of shoes and started running. And I said, this is what I like to do.
Wow.
And so that was probably at about 1971.
Okay, wow.
Something like that.
Got you. So did you run for the school?
Yeah, I ran track for Portsmouth. I ran the 2 mile. I wasn't very good. But my real love in distance running was running on the roads. I hated track. I lettered in track at Portsmouth, but I hated it.
What was it about track that you hated?
It's just, you do your event, you just sit around.
I want to be done with it.
We were on a road trip to Barbersville, and man, it was cold and rainy, and I ran my event, and here I'm just bored to death, and you got to wait for the end of the meet to go home, and it's just boring. But road running was my love.
So road running, big time.
And I was fascinated by one thing that I think helped inspire me was Frank Shorter winning the gold medal in the marathon in the 1972 Munich Olympics. And I think that really, it didn't kickstart me, but it really got me to a higher level. And then that's when I started thinking about, hey, I want to run the marathon like he did.
So what does it take as an athlete to be good at long distance running?
But I think the thing is, with anything, you have to love it. If you don't love it, you're not going to stick with it. You're not going to train properly. You're not going to do the things that you're supposed to do to be the best that you can be.
So does that go hand in hand? I know you're a stickler for staying in shape, but had you took up football or some other particular sport, even though all sports take some amount of discipline or conditioning, I should say, but is it why even later in your years you were a stickler for being in shape?
When you're a kid, you don't have any problem staying in shape. Right. You can eat a large pizza, it's gone the next day. I mean, you don't even gain an ounce. But in distance running, my feeling was, if I'm going to run the marathon, then I've got to keep myself in shape. Not only am I going to be a runner, I'm going to look like a runner. And it's just a matter of having pride in yourself. You can't run a marathon being obese. I guess you could, but that wasn't me. My thing was, if I'm going to do the marathon, and that was my goal from early on, I said, I want to run a marathon. You've got to be in shape, because I would read these running magazines, and these guys and women are just rail thin. So I gathered that. I said, look, you got to get in shape. But you got to love it. That's the number one thing, to love it.
That makes perfect sense. So I'm going to try to connect the dots here. So your first interaction with black people is a two-way street. The black community absolutely loves Dave Maynard. And Dave Maynard has been a strong, firsthand supporter of just black people in general.
My first exposure was when I was at Lincoln School. I sat in front of Ricky Williamson and Mike Goolsby, and that was my first experience with black folks. Of course, we're in elementary school, but I had a pretty good connection eventually with Ricky, and we got to be pretty good friends. And from then on, it just seemed like it was just the black community. It expanded to a point where it was a fascination with me. I said, this is something I had never experienced before. But since we lived close to what's called the North End, I had developed a number of black friends. I don't like to use that terminology, but since we're talking about my involvement with the black community, that's what I'm going to say. But it just expanded from there. It just being at Lincoln School in the 6th grade and going from there. And one of the things that really helped me was playing basketball at Lincoln School. So many of the kids I played with were black, and we got to develop friendships, and so it just took off from there.
So could you touch on that a little bit? You had made a Facebook post not too long ago about the number of kids that, especially in that heyday, that played in the several different parks. Obviously, Bannon Park was considered like the NBA of it all, but you also had Lincoln, McKinley, etc. But the outdoor aspect of it. So could you touch as much as you want to on just the outdoor aspect of that training ground, so to speak?
I played mostly at Lincoln School. I didn't play hardly any at McKinley. And Bannon Park, they're too good for me. So. But my exposure to Bannon Park was just watch.
Right.
But yeah, I played a lot at Lincoln School. And back when I started playing basketball, there were a lot of kids playing ball. It's just so different today. But yeah, Lincoln School was the north branch of Bannon Park. Because a lot of the Trojans played at Lincoln School.
State champions have played at Lincoln School.
I played against a lot of the guys that played for the Trojans. So I got embarrassed quite a bit.
I always joke with a lot of people that's from my generation. We talk about how it felt like literally everybody played basketball. Like the people that played basketball is one thing. Like we know Mr. Larry Heisels, even to the younger generations, Kyrie Allison, Wayne Evans, blah, blah, blah. The quote unquote superstars. They played basketball. But the fringe players, everybody played basketball. So you would see like a Robert Dale Harrison, a William Tanner, a Leon Nelson, Tim Oliphant, just people that you wouldn't necessarily, from a younger generation than myself, they probably look at them like, yeah, only the stars play. But literally, it felt like everybody played.
Well, there were guys that played every bit as good as the guys that played for the Trojans. But for some reason, whatever it was, they did end up not playing for Portsmouth. But I can tell you, I played with a lot of guys that didn't play for Portsmouth that could really play.
I believe it.
Yeah, so I'm not one of those people.
But to me, Dave, you represent the guy that maybe not necessarily played for the Trojans, but played basketball.
I held my own.
Yeah.
The thing what it did, Gerald, was it made me better.
So if we got 5-on-5 or 3-on-3 or whatever, and we're 1 or 2 men short, I'm picking Dave Maynard.
I don't know why.
Because we know you can compete.
I had the conditioning. I felt I was better conditioned than anybody. And I think that really helped me grow as a basketball player.
So there's a sweet spot in your sports fandom when it comes to Trojan boys basketball. I believe it's your freshman year of high school. So tell us about your first point in your life when you really started following.
Probably my freshman year, which was 1971-72. We were the first freshman class to actually be allowed to attend Portsmouth High School. Before that year, 9th graders had to go to either McKinley or Grant. So my class, the class of 75, was the first freshman class to be allowed to attend Portsmouth High School. But then I went to games back then, but I don't have a real clear recollection of when I started going. But I do know that it started back then.
So I had a conversation off the record with one Mr. Jeff Lysop, and he talked about, I think he believes he was the first freshman. Actually, I can't remember if it was played varsity or started varsity, but basically when he was a freshman, it was around the same time that you mentioned, a year or 2, 3, 4 years later, where I think he got called up against Middletown, I believe. I think that was his story. But anyway, that gives a lot of clarity. I didn't realize that. Even when I had a conversation with him, I didn't realize just UCLA in college basketball, freshman at one point in time wasn't a part of the varsity program, I guess you could call it, but
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
it was rare for a freshman or even a sophomore back then to play on the
sure.
varsity basketball team at Portsmouth, because Portsmouth was a lot bigger school. Most of the roster was pretty much made up of juniors and seniors, and it was mostly seniors that played. But yeah, Jeff had an early start to his Trojan career.
So let's talk about some of the stars or the players or the teams that you're still in school. So we're still in school, and what do you remember about that era and when it comes to the players or the teams?
And Mike Loveguth in 1972, he was one that's of the people that I remember early on that
Right.
stood out. He scored 36 points against Salina in the 1972 regional semifinal. Portsmouth, and Salina was ranked number 1 in the state.
Yeah, wow.
And that's the most points ever scored by a Trojan past district play.
Got you.
He went on to play at Kent State, had a good career. And then following, that was 1972. 73, Pat Spriggs was a really good player. He had 30 points in a game. Keith Williamson was a tremendous defensive player. And then you have Bo Clemens. That was his junior year. Bo graduated in 74. Bo was just, he was tremendous. He was tremendous. Bo was one of the all-time great Trojans.
That's what I've heard. I've heard
And
many stories about.
then my senior year, 75, Ricky Williamson, David Underwood, Danny Tyler. That was a scrappy team. We made it to the district finals that year. We beat New Philadelphia in the district semifinal, but lost to Zanesville in the district final.
Got you. That's awesome history, man. So what was it, or how early was it when you really thought to yourself to really, whether it be a mental Rolodex that you had or if you started writing things down, did you become passionate about it because of you recognized a lot of the greatness of it, or what do you recall about why you really?
I think the thing that triggered my interest in the history of Portsmouth basketball was those state championship banners on the wall. Now, this was before the
So
last
at the time there was 2.
Yeah, at the time there were 2, 1931, 1961. And I thought, there's got to be more to our history than just winning a couple of state championships.
Right.
And then Jeff and Craig in the 1960s.
So we'll pause right there. We'll get to Jeff and Craig again.
Yeah.
We'll get to
The thing is, my interest hadn't really heightened
peaked yet.
for about past 1978.
Got you.
As far as the recording of the history.
Got you. So let's go ahead and finish out high school. So where were you at when you graduated? What was your decision in life? Going to college, going to what?
After I graduated in 75, I went to Ohio University, Portsmouth.
Okay.
And then I transferred to OU, Ohio University, Athens, for about 3 years. And I ended up graduating in March of 81.
Got you.
Now, as far as the...
So now we can jump to 78, or what you remember about it, or...
78 was, probably is the most special year since I followed the Trojans, really, because it was an experience that I had never had before. To watch Portsmouth play for a state championship. None of the teams beforehand had come really close to winning a state championship or even playing for one. But the 78 team, pretty much, that was a totally special experience for me. I sat on the top row of St. John Arena watching us win the state championship. So
Wow.
that year stands out more than any other.
That's awesome. Awesome. Obviously, the Trojans have had many rivalries, many battles. You have the Portsmouth Ironton rivalry, Portsmouth Burg, just Portsmouth, and a lot of the teams that they faced over the years. Chillicothe, I know that's one of your favorites.
Chillicothe was a bitter rival in the 1970s, and it was bitter even before I went to school. There were some legendary games back in the 50s and 60s. In 50 and 51, we beat Chillicothe back-to-back for the district championship, and in 1950, either 50 or 51, Chillicothe was undefeated going into that game, and the Trojans upset them. And then in 61, we beat Chillicothe in the district final, and it was a buzzer beater.
Wow.
And then we went on to win the state. But Chillicothe and Portsmouth have a long history, and we played them last year, which I was glad to see because we haven't played them for quite a while.
Yep.
And I remember going home, walking up Waller Street after a game, We beat Chillicothe. I can't remember what year it was. And somebody rolled down the window and said, "River Rats." They like to call us River Rats.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'm hoping we can keep Chillicothe on the schedule.
That would be great to see. So we talked a little bit about some of the rivals.
I'm just going to add, we think Wheelersburg is a rivalry. It's not nearly the rivalry that Chillicothe was.
I like it. I got you, and I'll 100% take your word for it, Dave, because you've been studying this thing a lot longer than I. And I definitely lean on you when it comes to almost all things Trojan boys basketball. So we talked about some of the rivalries, but I also want to talk about some of the leagues, more specifically the Greater Ohio League. To the audience, give a rundown of the sort of class play and then also the Greater Ohio League. So take that how you want to.
The Greater Ohio League pretty much existed from like the mid-40s to about the mid-70s, actually about when I graduated. The members of the league, for the most part, it changed its membership from time to time, but basically most of the years it was Portsmouth, Hamilton, Middletown, Lima, and Springfield.
Yeah.
Springfield split Springfield North and Springfield South, but the league pretty much stayed together until, like I said, the mid-70s, and Middletown and Hamilton had already left the league. When I graduated in 75, it was Lima, Springfield South, and Portsmouth. Then a year or two after that, it just completely disbanded. But between 1944 and 1961, the Greater Ohio League produced 11 state champions in basketball. And that was in the big class. Portsmouth was one of the 11. Middletown had won 7 state championships. Hamilton won 3, had not won one, and we won 1. But 11 state championships at that time was the most of any league in Ohio.
That sounds amazing.
But then after the Greater Ohio League, Portsmouth's been in several leagues since then. The Tri-State Athletic Conference back in the late 70s, that didn't last very long.
You have a favorite outside of the Greater Ohio League?
As far as league, I like the OCAC a lot. With Boyd County, Ashland, Russell, Greenup, Portsmouth, and Ironton. That was from 1986 to 1993. Portsmouth won it 5 years in a row. From 87 to, and we were dominant. We beat Ashland one year, 110 to 50. And Ashland was always a good basketball program. Now, Ashland beat our state champions at Ashland that year. They won the state that year in Kentucky in 61. But in 1960, we beat Ashland. We thumped them here at Portsmouth. But anyway, yeah, I like the OCAC. And I like the OVC today. We're a smaller school now.
Understood. You say the 78 team has a special one in your heart because it's the first time you got to witness it. 61 had already happened. And
the thing about the 78 team, too, is not only did we play for a state championship, but I remember at Valley High School that year, Wheelersburg had us beat. They were up 2 points, and they had a 1-on-1 with just seconds to go, and they missed the front end. And then we ended up bringing the ball down and tying the game and won the game in overtime. And then that was for the sectional championship. And then the district championship, we played Washington Courthouse. Craig Tubbs made a jumper with 3 guys on him to tie the game and send it into overtime. We beat Washington Courthouse in overtime. And so we had some close calls in that 78 tournament. But in the regional, we thumped Mifflin and thumped Bel Air. And we ended up winning the state. We beat Cleveland Latin by 1 point. And Cleveland Latin was the defending state champion.
That's something, man. That is something.
Jeff Lyseth and Craig Tubbs were just put on the show.
That's a heck of a
put on the show.
Just thinking about that, we had a Zoom call with Jeff and Craig maybe a couple years ago, and I was just having a conversation with them about that run. They had, in their mind, believed they were going to win a state championship at some point in time in their high school careers, but it just came down to a perfect storm where coming into the season, they had high hopes. Middle of the season, Jeff gets hurt, slipped on a sucker, injures some ligaments, I believe, in somewhere in his lower extremity. So then they spiraled at some point in time during the season, and then he was finally cleared right before the tournament. I'm sure they're hoping that they can rekindle the magic, what they felt like they could have done. And when you have that sectional, I'm sure that was a scary
it was
burner, so to speak.
Right. Now, Wheelersburg had beaten us in the last game of the regular season that year, 54-52, and then we beat them 54-52 in the
exact same school.
sectional
that
tournament.
crazy?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that year was a year that I had never experienced before. I played for a state championship.
Yeah.
It was just an awesome experience. It really was.
So now let's get to the military. So again, talk to us about your time and decision to join the service, and how was that experience?
I enjoyed my time in the service. I enlisted on July 25th, 1984 in the Air Force. I just felt at the time I wasn't working full time, so I don't know what spurred me to join the military, but I did join. And I did basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas for 6 weeks.
You have any military family? You the first to go?
No, my dad.
Okay.
My dad was in the military. He was in the Korean War.
Okay.
I got exposed to fire ants down in San Antonio.
Oh boy, that was experience.
Yeah, for anybody that's ever experienced fire
Woo!
ants.
That ain't fun, huh?
They're named appropriately. After those 6 weeks, I had a rough basic training. I just wasn't used to that type of structure. But I persevered, and then I went to tech school at Biloxi, Mississippi for 6 weeks, and I trained as a secretary.
Right.
In the Air Force, they call it a 702 admin specialist. I was stationed at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. When I was in the military, they gave you choices as to where you want to go, and they would try to fit you the best they can. So I chose Scott Air Force Base as one of my choices. That's where I went, and I spent my whole 4 years there. And so that's when my marathon experience really took off. My first marathon was in 1981 in Columbus. But my best marathon was when I was in the military. In 1985, I ran St. Louis in 2:55.
Woo.
But the best years, I think, my marathon fitness was when I was in the military.
So for the audience, what's the actual distance of a marathon?
26.2 miles.
26.2 miles.
Yeah, 2:55, which I ran in St. Louis, was I averaged 6:42 per mile. And when I crossed the finish line, I kid you not, I could have run 10 more miles.
Wow.
I was in
great
fantastic
condition,
shape.
Awesome.
But the longest run I ever had was not in a road race. It was on my own. It was a solo run from Iron to Huntington to West Huntington, from West Huntington to Catlettsburg to Ashland, from Ashland back to Ironton.
Come on, Dave.
It was about 40 miles.
Oh, my Lord.
And that was in the days when you didn't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
So if something happened to me,
it could have been anything.
I don't know. They would have found me dead on the highway, I guess. But I took some money with me because you had to hydrate. I stopped at some convenience stores, but I would never do that today. I mean, because there's a lot more traffic now. But that was quite an experience. 40 miles and all by myself. So I was real proud of that.
I love it. Let's see, if someone were to ask you why Portsmouth Trojan basketball is special to you, what do you feel like your answer would be for why you feel like it's special?
I think one of the reasons it's special is because we've been good at it for so long. If you're bad at something, it's probably not going to be nearly as special. It might be, it's a school you graduated from, but Portsmouth is traditionally been one of the top 10 programs all time in the state of Ohio as far as number of wins, top 10 in state championships, top 10 in state appearances, top 10 in number of state tournament games played. We've got a tremendous resume, and I think that as a result, you take a lot of pride in it. I don't know about very many people that have a lot of pride in a losing program.
Yeah, you're right. So when you win,
does anybody ever come up to you and brag about it?
Man, I can't.
Boy, we've got a great losing program. We're so proud of our program.
So I think we talked about that the other day. This is about the passion, and a lot of times, if you're passionate about something, you're definitely going to be more dedicated to it. You're going to turn over every rock, everything you can do to kind of parade that and celebrate it. So I definitely can speak for myself. I appreciate the knowledge that you've acquired. It's tedious work. Me and Mr. Maynard went down there to the library the other day, and he was just showing me the ropes, a little bit of research process, and it's the microfiche system that they have down there. And I want you to talk about the research process. If somebody brings you something and you want to look further into it, how do you go about doing that?
There's several ways to collect information. Most of the information I collected was through the box scores, stories of games, and then I got some information from yearbooks. But people may say, hey, I've got this statistic or whatever. You don't want to doubt them. Collecting information and trying to compile it is an inexact science.
Right.
So it's not going to be 100% accurate. For example, like the total number of wins that Portsmouth has all the time. There's different numbers. But as far as the microfiche, like on Trojan Hoops, there's a topic 30-point games. That's where I got the 30-point games from, was the microfiche, because you have to scroll, and Gerald knows this, you have to scroll and find box scores. Otherwise, you're not going to get that from the yearbook. And then so many other things come from the microfiche. So that year-by-year records. Just think, now, I did get quite a bit of that from yearbooks, but the yearbooks were not really all that reliable. Yearbooks are different from year to year depending on what the students do. So you can't really depend on that. One of the interesting things I did get from an early yearbook was it was the earliest game that I ever found that Portsmouth played. And believe it or not, it was in May. May 5th, 1908. We beat Ironton 22-4.
Why was they playing May?
I have no idea whether, but back in the early 1900s, football and baseball were the big sports. Basketball was a newbie sport. There was almost no coverage whatsoever about basketball. And ironically, basketball became the sport that Portsmouth was best known.
Yeah, put them on the map.
But yeah, collecting information is a very tedious process. And for anybody that's read Trojan Hoops, I'm not bragging upon myself, but I have spent countless hours and hours compiling that information.
So let's do that plug real quick. Make sure you check out trojanhoops.org, www.trojanhoops.org, for anything when it comes to Portsmouth Trojan basketball. It's the holy grail, so to speak. It's the Bible of Portsmouth basketball. If you want to know anything about any team historically, if it's not there, you probably got to do the research yourself. So here we are at the Roots and Routes podcast. We want you to make sure you like, share, subscribe, follow us on all the digital platforms. We're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we will continue to put out amazing content. TrojanHoops.org. Make sure you go there. It's a wealth of information when it comes to Trojan basketball. We got plenty of more with my friend, Mr. Dave Maynard. And you can tackle that however you want to. Continue the conversation of when it comes to your involvement and relationship with the black community.
It evolved over a number of years, and it's interesting how I just felt comfortable being around black folks, and we just seemed to hit a connection. I think the important thing is that in some aspects of American society, you don't see enough of this. You have to mingle with one another. You have to have contact with one another. And that way, myths and other things that some people perceive as true are not true. Let's be honest, there's been myths that white America has about black America. But the thing is this, those myths can be torn down if you have contact with, like, oh, black people are not as intelligent as white people. Come on. Black people don't do this. Come on. It's just ridiculous.
There's a level of appreciation that you can gather from just understanding the context of anything. So obviously the hurdles that have been placed in our way have not completely deterred the human spirit.
I'm just going to add, Gerald, how many years did we hear black quarterbacks are not smart enough to play the quarterback position? That's just a stupid myth. Black America has shown if they're given the opportunity, they can do anything that's in front of them. The President of the United States.
I'll go as far as to say we can excel in any arena. A lot of times it's the position that we've been placed in that have...
you've been put in a disadvantaged position. And you had to fight harder to achieve the level that you wanted to achieve, the position that you wanted to be in society.
So I think sports is a great even playing field when it comes to if you place people in an arena where it's competition. If you're able to compete at an even playing field, then it's the great equalizer.
Right, but then sports is probably the most visible connection that we have as far as what people perceive of what black people can achieve. But then we have black engineers, we have black doctors, we have black scientists, and they happen to find the right opportunity or earn their opportunity, and they made the most of it. So they've shown that they can do anything that any other race of people can do. But when I was growing up, I heard those same myths. I would think I was smart enough to say, look, I'm gonna find out for myself.
Well, if you think about it, from such a small community, you can look on the wall and you can see several prominent individuals that have excelled. So not only from Portsmouth, but more specifically from the North End. So let's talk about your foray into southeasternohiopreps.com. Like, how long have you been following that message board, and or is there a precursor to?
Yeah, well, actually, I first joined JJ Huddle.
I remember
JJ Huddle was back in the 90s. Steve Foster was the one that alerted me to JJ
Get out of
Huddle.
here, man. Not my homie Steve Foster. Not my friend Steve Foster.
We were shooting basketball one day, and we were talking about Nebraska football.
Oh, my God. This is great. This is golden gems, Maynard.
But he said, have you ever heard of JJ Huddle? I said, no. I don't know what we were actually specifically talking about with JJ Huddle. We said, you should check it out. So I checked it out, and I liked it. And so I joined JJ Huddle. And then the guy that owned it sold JJ Huddle, and it's no longer in existence. So then I joined Southeastern Ohio Preps, and that was back in the 90s.
So I've been
on
part of that for a minute.
Southeastern Preps actually has been reconfigured a couple of times.
Okay.
But then I joined Yappy in 2014. Yappy's like Southeastern Ohio Preps. Trojan Hoops started in 2011. It was the brainchild of Eugene Collins, Marcus Bendoff, Matt Payton, and myself. We met in a room and talked about trying to get a website pertaining to the history of Portsmouth basketball.
Awesome.
But now Eugene doesn't really involve himself anymore. Marcus does. So basically, Matt Payton runs it, and he allows me to keep doing the history part of it.
Shout out to Coach Collins. Shout out to Matt Payton. Shout out to Pastor Bendoff, Marcus Bendoff. And of course, shout out to you, Mr. Maynard.
So that's where I stand. I'm on 4 different websites now. I'm on Trojan Hoops, Southeastern Ohio Preps, Yappy, and Facebook.
Facebook. Now we got to touch on this, Dave. Now, yesterday, man, this dude went on a whole tangent when we were talking about, what, yesterday, the day before?
All these useless notifications. I mean, you don't need to know about Jane Doe's recipe for barbecue chicken. Okay? I don't need to know that. Stop.
So you was getting notifications?
Yes, in my Yahoo mailbox.
Who got Yahoo anymore, Dave? That's almost like I got AOL. I got Yahoo.
Come on. Enough of those stupid notifications.
Got you. That's great.
So Gerald,
that's a classic Raider rant right there.
So Gerald showed me how to basically delete those notifications.
Yeah, because he was going to delete his Facebook.
Yeah,
I'm done with it. I'm done with it. I'm like, Dave, let me walk you through it. You don't have to delete your Facebook. Just we can mute the
notifications. Here's Jane Doe's newborn baby. What great. Nice. I'm happy for you, Jane, but I don't know who you are.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so I'm on Facebook. Facebook's just so different than these other sites, though. It's just, man, it just seems like people are nosy or whatever. I guess you could block them or what. I don't block anybody. Now I have, when somebody asks to confirm or deny like a friend's request, I always put confirm. I don't want to deny. I'm kind of rude.
So you made a list, Dave. Remind me of the list. There was a top. What was it? A top 40 or a top 50? You ended up making a top 100, but what was it?
Top 100 players since I was in school. Yeah, and I got a lot of pushback from that. Oh, how dare you put me at number 90?
Can't please everybody.
That's right, tough.
So let's look at this.
Tough luck.
In my world, you're a number.
So let's look at this real quick, Dave. So let's look at the top 30.
Oh, you still got that?
Yeah, of course, Dave,
It's like-
the internet is forever.
That's back in
The
2011.
internet is forever, Dave. So let's do like a word association. So I'm going to name a player, and you just tell me anything that you remember about them. So I'm going to go top 20. Phil Whitehead.
He scored 1,000 points. Actually played as a freshman on the '88 state champions. So from '88 to '91.
Yeah, that was
He's
the
one of the
original
few-
final '91.
Yeah, he's one of the few people that played on 4 varsity teams.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, let's keep going. David Barnes. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear David Barnes?
24 rebounds against Kettering Alder in the regional semifinal, but he has the most points ever scored in the state tournament by any player. He had 24 points against Mansfield Malabar.
Okay.
That's the highest individual point total by any Trojan in state tournament play.
OB, Larry Berry.
Well, Larry was probably one of the most athletic players we've ever had. He averaged about 18 points a game. Didn't play his senior year due to some personal circumstances, but he was a tremendous player, and his brother was very good too, Gerald Froh.
And we'll get to him. Scott Taylor.
Scott Taylor was a very underrated player, 6'5", center for the '78 state champions. He came back the very next year and led the Trojans to their only AP bowl championship. They were 18-0.
Now we talk about LB's younger brother, Gerald Froh.
Gerald graduated, I think, in 2003, played with Justin Nelson. Gerald, I think, was a good high school player, but I actually think he was better past high school. But he always had a real nice jump shot. But he was a good ball player. Unfortunately, the Trojans didn't have a very good team that year. They had a losing record.
Larry Green.
Larry was first team, I think he's first team All-Ohio, 1976. Just one of those guys that was in great shape. And Rip Hamilton, for those people that know Rip Hamilton, who I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But Larry he graduated a year after I did. But he's part of the Green family legacy. And I'm sitting across from one right here. He was
Yes,
a
sir.
Trojan himself.
Yes, sir.
And his brother was a Trojan.
Yes, sir.
But the Green family has contributed a lot to the history of Portsmouth basketball.
Respect and love to the Greens. Love. So let me ask you, how in the world do you do this, Dave? Is this you got a photographic memory, or is just a passion that you have about it? Like, how do you remember that? There's no way I could do that.
Sure you could, Gerald. Look at all this stuff. I have no idea what you're doing here. Click this, push this, adjust this, push a button here, push a button there. I have no idea what you're doing.
Okay.
No, but look, once you rehearse this information, it's burned in your memory. I mean,
okay, I like
a lot of that stuff I don't need to look up. Now, if you want to really ask me an obscure question, yeah, maybe I'd have to look it up. But there's a lot that I don't need to look up. I'm not bragging on myself, but it's a matter of repetition.
Gotcha.
And with that being said, Maynard's been involved in many playground debates on statistics and sports up at Lincoln, so he goes far outside of just Portsmouth basketball history.
Some of these people try to get under my skin.
No,
that's their main purpose.
No,
because they know they get me mad in 5 seconds.
Okay, we'll continue on with this little word association game. So we're gonna go with A-Rod, Anthony Williams.
Anthony, 6'6", about 18 points, 18 rebounds his senior year, 2009. Unfortunately, we lost to North Adams, which was undefeated in the sectional.
Yep.
77-75 in overtime.
Wow.
And Anthony, man, I look at somebody like Anthony, if we could just had him like on your team, 1999.
Yeah.
The team that really could have won the state. You put Anthony Williams on that team, we go to the state, at least go to the state. But he was tremendous.
All right, Nelly, Darnell Lysom.
Darnell had the most points ever scored by a Trojan in any tournament game. He had 38 points against Greenfield McLean in the 1994 district championship, the combo. And he averaged 20 points a game that year. But what I remember, too, about that season was we had a game at Albany Alexander, and they just absolutely mugged him. If it was out on the street, it would have been felonious assault.
Oh, really?
No call. No call.
Oh, my God.
No foul. And then Albany beat us. And, man, I just made me so mad to hammer somebody like that. But let's be honest, You're in a small, all-white school out in the country. You're a mostly black team. Guess what happens? You don't get that call.
Gotcha.
That's right. You heard me, people.
All right, we got a couple more. So let's go with Bowie, a.k.a. Darren Miller.
Darren averaged 20 points a game, and in 1984, 6'6" center. I believe he made first team All-Ohio. He's in the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, that 1984 team, they went 7-0 against Columbus School, and they lost to Wheelersburg in the district final. Wheelersburg had a good team, but
Yeah.
that's one of the toughest losses in Portsmouth history.
Gotcha.
Because that team, I rate that team basically in the top 5 of the
All
teams
time.
that I saw, talent-wise.
I got you.
Kyle Taylor, Darren Miller, Danny Reed, Alvin Williams, Lee Hooks. That's a heck of a starting 5. And Timmy Harris coming off the bench.
Was that before Gene or after Gene?
That was the year after Eugene. Eugene graduated in 83.
Gotcha. So Torrey Horn.
Torrey came from Port Clinton, and he had to sit out half of the first year he came there. But man, he was a smooth operator. That's what I think of
Real deal.
Torrey. 25 points a game.
Yeah.
He scored 34 against Chillicothe over a guy named Malik London, about
Malik
6'8".
London, yeah,
Malik London was a
Malik.
defensive,
He's a monster.
master.
Yes.
and Torrey took
like
it
Ben
right to
Wallace.
him, scored over him, around him, or whatever. But Torrey was a smooth operator. Him and Andrew, that was a heck of a backcourt.
And you touched on him a little bit earlier, but go ahead and do a little more of Mike Lovingood.
Then I don't have a real clear recollection of Mike, even though he did average 22 points a game. And he scored 36 against Salina, like I said, in the regional semifinal. He ended up going to Kent State and had a really good career. And he ended up coaching Wheelersburg to the state tournament in 1984 and 1989. But he's a Trojan legend. I had him rated on your precious list there.
I got him on here, Dave.
I think I got him in the top.
It's not my list. This is your list.
Number 9.
Hey, it's your
well,
list,
I know,
Dave.
but you didn't want to delete it. I
Oh,
see.
never. Like I said, the internet is for
Hey,
everything.
anything, something goes public, it's open for critical.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
critique.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What gets me is, look,
Oh.
don't talk to me about somebody that you never saw play. At least I saw him. No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about somebody that, you got me rated 94. Who did you see play?
Yeah.
Most guys they
They're
focus
prisoners of
on
the
the
moment.
contemporaries.
Yeah.
The people who play maybe a year or two before them, maybe a year or two after them. And they don't go to that many games. But to compile a list of 100, just name 100 players.
Just to name 100 is
And then
tough.
rank them. I knew that some of them are out of whack. I'm sure they are. I didn't expect it to be perfect. But some of these people, come on, if you're going to complain.
Have them put together a list.
Exactly. Put together a list. Name 100 players. Name 50.
All right, let's continue on. Dominique McKinley, Dr. Dom.
Dominic McKinley was a great all-around player. Another family that contributed a lot to Portsmouth basketball. He played on the 1988 state championship team. Underrated scorer, but his main thing was defense. But I remember watching a video. They threw an alley-oop to him against Boyd County down here in Portsmouth. He jammed it down. But Dominic actually led the team in scoring in the state championship game. He had 19 points in that state championship game.
I tell you what, you're a stickler for people being in shape. We had him here this last summer, and he looked like he could play like right now, and like he's running up and down the court with the kids and everything. Like this dude is immaculate shape.
Well, he's also an example of what we talked about earlier. If we talked about black folks getting the opportunity and making the most of that opportunity, he became a doctor.
Yep.
So he had the opportunity and he made the most of that opportunity.
Shout out to Dr. Dom, Dr. Dominique McKinley. So let's move along. We got just several more. Alfonso Watkins.
Probably the best leaper I've ever seen. You talking about 40 plus vertical? Fonz was a late bloomer.
Right.
He was not heralded at all until about his senior year, and he actually ended up going to Miami of Ohio because that was the pipeline back then. Alfonso Watkins, Jeff Lycett, Scott Taylor, Craig Tubbs. But Fonz, what he was known for was his tremendous leaping ability. And he averaged probably around, I'd say, 15, 16 points a game.
Kyle Taylor.
Another family that had a lot of contributions to Portsmouth basketball. Kyle was his first love was baseball.
Wow.
But then he became a really good basketball player. He ended up playing collegiately at Xavier, scored in the NCAA tournament. He's first team All-Ohio and a Hall of Famer. But he was on that 84 team. And just, I still remember that year that you can't get that out of your mind almost, how good that team was and how they lost to Wheelersburg in this district final.
Nah, man, that had to be tough.
Yeah, Wheelersburg made it all the way to the state championship game that year, and they lost to Joe Subotecki, Akron
Right.
St. Vincent St. Mary in the state championship
Is that
game.
Jerome Lane?
I think so, yeah.
I think so. I think you're right.
Send it
So,
down.
and they had a kid named Wilson too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Bo Clemens, you touched on him earlier. Go ahead and give a little more.
Bo unfortunately hurt his knee his senior year, and that kind of curtailed his senior year. But he averaged 24 points a game. I don't know. I didn't compile his all-time career total, so I don't know if he scored 1,000 points. Back then, it was hard. 1,000 points because there weren't as many games back then. And if you wanted to score 1,000, you had to play as a sophomore quite a bit.
Gotcha.
But the Bo was another one of those smooth operators.
I remember Mr. Bo Clemens told me, he said, Green, I'm the best you done seen for free.
Yeah.
The best you done seen for
He could do
free.
a spin move better than the washing machine. Yeah.
Got you.
Mr. Bo Clemens.
All
And
right.
he ended up going to Miami of Ohio, I think. Yeah.
So once again, we're on the Roots and Routes podcast. Like, share, subscribe. Follow us on all the digital platforms. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Fanbase, Twitter, aka X, Snapchat. I'm short. MySpace, Dave, man, we're on Mice. No, I'm just kidding. We ain't on MySpace. All right, so let's continue on. We got a couple more on this list of your top 100 athletes since your freshman year in 1972. Am I saying that right? Is this
71, 72.
71, 72. So now we're at Damon Manning.
Don is the son of Walt Manning, who played in the 60s. Walt had 33 points against Greenfield McLean in 1967. But anyway, Damon was 1,000 point scorer. He scored 1,057 points, averaged over 26 points a game one year, his senior year. But he also played on the 1990, he was starting point guard on the 1990 state runner-up team. But due to personal circumstances, didn't finish his senior year.
Yeah.
But he ended up playing for Baylor.
Yep.
But he was a tremendous point guard. And he had a brother, Byron, who played in 1989, about 6'7". And for some reason, he didn't finish he wasn't eligible, I think, for the part of the season. Yeah, but Byron was a really good player too. But that's three Mannings. It's amazing how in a small town like Portsmouth, you have families
Yep.
that one right after the other, or whatever, that made significant contributions to Portsmouth basketball, like the Parkers in football.
Absolutely. Grouch, Patrick Tubbs.
And Patrick Tubbs, to me, is one of the absolute greatest players we've ever had. He led the Trojans in scoring 3 years in a row, 86, 87. He scored 1,297 points for his career, and that put him, I think, 6th all time. DeAndre Berry is 7th at 1,264. But anyway, Patrick, in 1988, we played Iron in Shawnee State Sectional. For anybody that was there, we were down 8 points with less than 5 minutes to go. It looked like we were going to get beat. All Iron had to do was run their offense for about 2 more minutes and we were beat. But Iron coach Phil Rice decided to slow it up. Patrick Tubbs took over that game. He scored 13 points in that final 4.5 minutes.
Wow.
And we won the game 59-56. And he had several threes. But I still think that if Iron had run their offense for 2 more minutes,
It's a wrap.
they would have beat it. Iron had a really good team. Doug Birchfield, Bobby Bryce. They had a really good team.
The name's synonymous with Ironson, too.
Yeah. But, Patrick was awesome. The thing about Patrick was he was very much like his brother Craig. They never got rattled. They just had an even keel about them. And
That's why they nicknamed him Grouch. He had that same face. It never changed. He didn't look excited. He always looked like it's all good. It's all good. So now we got 2 more names on this list. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, so we were not excluding people, but these are people that Dave Maynard has had an opportunity since
are you
freshman
going to
year.
get the Maynard's kids?
Oh, God. We're going to talk about Maynard's kids a little bit.
Okay.
We got two more. Jeff Lysa.
Obviously, Jeff played on the 78 team, one of the absolute greatest players we've ever had. Like I said, that year was the most special to me because that was something that I'd never experienced before, seeing Portsmouth play for a state championship. And Jeff scored 159 points those 8 games in the tournament in 1978. Craig Tubbs scored 160. But Jeff, he pretty much was a standard setter, like you had alluded to earlier, played as a freshman.
Right.
And back then, that just didn't happen. But he scored 1,256 points, 8 points less than DeAndre Berry. But Jeff ended up going to Miami of Ohio and started for Darrell Hedrick, along with Craig Tubbs. But Jeff was only about 6'2", but he did everything. He just did everything. And he was a clutch player, too.
Big time.
But he wrote a couple books about his experience, about his faith in God, and about how he felt that praying to God would allow him to win a state championship. I can't debate that, but all I can say is the other team was praying too, probably. But anyway, it's a good book. It's a well-written book, and I enjoy reading it. Jeff's a good guy. He coached our team 2 years ago, 17-7. First winning record since 2018, but unfortunately, it only lasted for 1 year.
So we got number one on the list, Mr. Craig Tubbs, on that same 78 team. You touched on him a little bit.
Yeah.
Give a little more if you
Yeah, Craig averaged 24.5 points a game. His senior year, he was the all-time leading scorer until Kyrie Allison broke his record. So Craig was one of those, like I said earlier, he was just cool under pressure. I remember against Chillicothe in his senior year, down at PHS, he had a cousin named Joe Glasgow that played on Chillicothe. And Craig made a jumper right about the free throw line, basically right at the buzzer. We beat it 51-50.
Wow.
And I remember that Washington courthouse shot at the combo. Man, there were 3 courthouse guys hanging all over it. And he swished it. That's when there was no three-pointer. If there had been a three-pointer, we would have won the game. But it went into overtime, and we ended up winning the game in overtime.
All right, so we're back at the Roots and Routes podcast. We want you to like, share, subscribe, follow us on all the digital platforms. I was just going to do the continuation. I happened to omit accidentally Marcus Bendoff. If you could do a quick word association, first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Marcus Bendoff.
He led the Trojans in scoring in the 1980 state tournament, 21 points in the semifinal, 16 points in the final against Hamilton Ross. He's the only Trojan ever to lead the team in scoring in both the semifinal and final games.
Interesting.
He scored 37 points total in the state tournament. But Marcus, he was a late bloomer too, because he didn't make much of a splash in 79. In 80, his senior year, we beat Waverly by 1 point, 49-40. I believe he made a couple free throws to win that game. And then Waverly shot the top of the key at the buzzer and missed, but we made it to the state. Anyway, that team, Marcus's senior year, 1980 team, was, you hate to say unathletic, but we were always known for our athletic team. But that team was, as far as foot speed, that was not one of the quicker teams we ever had. But it was Keith Wilburn, Troy Jackson, Marcus Bendoff, Kirk McMahon, and we had Kevin Wilburn and John Mitchell. And we had a lot of size on that team. Keith and Kevin were 6'6", John Mitchell was 6'5". But Hamilton Ross come down, they were down 2. Hamilton Ross come down, and they scored with just 30 seconds to go. I think we were up 1 point. We were up 1 point. And they scored with 30 seconds to go, put them up 1. And then Marcus got fouled, knocked to the floor. No call. No call. And it would have been a 1-on-1 or whatever with 7 seconds, and we didn't score, so we lost by 1. But that was a year that it's haunting because that could have been a state championship. It is what it is. That's what happened.
Just the same as the 88 team could have not made it out the sectional. Sometimes the ball bounces certain ways, and it just happens the way it happens for whatever reason. But it's still part of the history of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Many players have donned the red and blue, contributed in different ways, and it's amazing to look back, reminisce, and enjoy the many memories we've been able to witness and even learn about. You know, I know your favorite nickname of Sweetwater. James Douglas, he was one of the ones that's part of the legacy of the history of the Trojans. So here we are at the Roots and Routes podcast. We're on season 1, episode 12. Now I'm going to call this simply Trojan Dave. But we want to have you back to the podcast, if you will, because we want to actually title the next time we bring you back to the podcast exactly what you said a second ago, Maynard's Kids. We would like an opportunity to bring you back because we've got many of people that we could bring to the table that know your mannerisms, can do some impersonations, and know a lot of the things that you would say in any given moment, depending on the circumstance.
Well, if you want to impersonate me, all you got to do is just blow up. Just get mad about anything.
I'm sure.
But it goes back to my involvement with the black community and playing basketball at Lincoln School.
Yeah.
I got to know a lot of the kids.
Right.
Back then, they were kids, and I'm older. Back in the 90s, here let's see, I graduated in 75, so I was 20 years older. Here I am, I'm near 40 years old, playing with kids. But some of them didn't have fathers or two parents in the home. Joe did, of course. But my first recollection of doing something for kids was the Green Boys. I took them to Side of the Breeze. I don't know if you remember that or not.
I remember.
But I took them to Side of the Breeze. Look at Side of the Breeze now. It doesn't even exist. But anyway, I don't even know what movie we watched. Maybe Godzilla or something.
Managers come over our house. Remember we said prayer meeting, manager?
Yeah, all that. We don't want to go down that.
Hey, so we can save that for
I
Maynard.
love God and I love Jesus, but that prayer meeting, man, you can take that and file 13 that thing. But I was just going to say, Gerald, is that, and you were one of the guys I played with.
I'm a Maynard kid.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to be called a Maynard's kid. But anyway.
They know they are.
And like I told him when I got recognized for that award with Nelson Wilson, I said, when I got involved with the black community, it made me a better person. And so what I'll take to my grave is I think I showed as much love as I possibly could toward the black community. And I wouldn't change a thing.
A lot of people know you from your dealings with the basketball team, but also your daily runs, your travels up and down these roads that you've many years. On the flip side, we also appreciate and respect a lot of the contributions that you just being the person that you are. The appreciation is a two-way street. And I think overall the awareness that you've had of your upbringing. So we're going to close out this particular interview, this conversation with a friend of mine, what we call a friend. But we know you have something that's near and dear to your heart, something about a challenge that you've had to overcome. And it could be a death sentence for some people, but overall, I think your perseverance, your determination, your willpower, and also your faith in God I'm sure has contributed in your mindset and mentality. So could you speak to that in whatever fashion you want to?
In June of 2022, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer because of an elevated PSA over 10 months. My PSA in 2021 was 3.0. It jumped to 8.5 10 months later. So my urologist at the time was Dr. Schmidt of King's Daughters, who did just a fabulous job with me. But anyway, he told me at the time, he said, we're going to wait a month, and I'm going to test you again. After a month, I was tested, and it was 8.8. So he said, look, what do you want to do? He gave me a biopsy, and he said, you do have prostate cancer. Do you want to get surgery? Do you want to do it with radiation? I said, I'm going to get surgery. Have it taken out, so I don't want it in there anymore. So I had surgery done at Mount Carmel St. Anne's on September 13th of 2022, and my cancer was just beginning stage 3. But since then, I've taken some hormone shots, I've had radiation, and everything looks really good right now. My PSA is less than 0.04. The reason I bring this up, 1 in 8 men this year will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. But in the African American community, 1 in 6 will be diagnosed with prostate cancer because African American men have the highest rate of prostate cancer in the United States. So it's a simple blood test. A PSA test is a simple 1 vial of blood out of your arm. It can save your life. It's not totally 100% accurate, but it's the first line of defense to signal whether you have prostate cancer or not. Because in my case, my PSA did reveal that I had prostate cancer. And I've tried to tell a number of people on the street, get your PSA tested. You know, Demetrius Stanley, and it's not just an old man's disease. A lot of people think it's an old man's disease, 65. I was diagnosed at 65. 2/3 of the cases are 65 and older. Demetrius Stanley, I don't know if you remember, was a wide receiver for Ohio State.
Yep.
Played in the late 90s. It was a good receiver, scored a touchdown in the Rose Bowl. He was diagnosed at 44. He's African American. He was diagnosed at 44. He died at 48 of prostate cancer.
Yeah.
And so it can be a disease that could strike you in the mid-40s. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get your PSA tested, especially in the African American community. I don't know as far as a person's insurance situation, but we have so many options with insurance or like free medical care or whatever, or low-cost medical care, that you have to get it done because it can be a silent killer. So just take it from my experience. I caught it in time. Thank goodness I had a good doctor and he routed me to the right things to do and my options. But please get your PSA checked. Please get your PSA checked. It can save your life.
Definitely call to action for everybody out there. Listen to the wisdom that Mr. Maynard has given.
Oh, I'm Mr. Maynard now? I'm not Trojan Dave?
You are Trojan Dave. You're Mr. Maynard. You're Dave.
You're man of many titles.
Man of many hats, man of many talents. And we appreciate you. We appreciate you coming to the Roots and Routes podcast.
You're welcome. I hope people out there that watched it could glean something valuable from it. I don't know, but I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Give it up for Trojan Dave. We'll have you back, Dave, and you'll have us. And once again, we're at the Roots and Routes podcast. And any final shots, final words?
I'd say go Trojans.
Go Trojans. We'll talk to you next time. God bless and good night.
All right.
Good deal.
Good job.
Well, thanks.